Hello and good morning, friends. Welcome back to A Garden Named Bill. Well, here we are at week 19. It's the middle of summer. We're halfway through August, and I would say things are going really well. We've got corn that's, putting ears on, and I've reseeded things for the fall garden, and the raspberries behind me here are starting to almost get a little pink, so the prima canes are going to be ready for harvest in another couple weeks. And I'm really pleased, and I'm thinking about the future, and things are good. So let me give you your overview shot. I mentioned the corn already. You can see the tassels there. We'll see the ears when we get a little bit closer. I transplanted a whole bunch of strawberries into the strawberry asparagus bed. We'll see that soon. Lots of bees in the squash on that side of the trellis doing their pollinating thing. Got some massive sunflowers. And then over here, it's the jungle of raspberries. This is kind of unorthodox for the overview shot, but I just wanted to show you. Get around my gooseberry, which needs pruning. I have a raspberry canopy that I can walk under. It's kind of an arch. Kind of fun. My plans for the week ahead are really minimal. You can see some red tomatoes around me. I just get to harvest those for BLTs or salsa or egg scrambles or whatever else. And I've got peppers here that can be harvested too, again for salsa or for snacking. I've got these new strawberries that I planted. Those will need some continual watering until they look like they've been really established, because some of them are runners, some of them are juvenile mother plants, some are really established plants. And then in the back over there, I reseeded a bunch of stuff, and I'll just need to make sure I get out in the early mornings or late evenings to make sure that those get their proper watering like you would do with any sort of seeds. Otherwise, it's really low maintenance this week in the garden. Well, we should definitely begin our highlights reel down here in the corn. I'll stand where one stalk got chopped off, but you can see I have at least 2 ears on each stalk, which I'm flabbergasted by. I wasn't expecting I'd get more than maybe 1 ear on each stalk. These are a weird hybrid between something I got from the grocery store, the kind of popcorn that we like the most, and some blue popcorn from M.I. Gardner. We'll see what the kernels look like, but the actual hair here is super soft. It feels like spaghetti squash. It's just really, really dear, and it's got this beautiful burgundy color to it, which I personally haven't experienced before. So this has took a turn for the better. Alright, so you won't see me in this frame, but I wanted to talk about strawberries. So here's the asparagus, which you can see all around, and an assortment of strawberries. I got donations from friends and neighbors, June-bearing, ever-bearing, day-neutrals. We had some juvenile mothers here. There are runners that I ended up transplanting. And then there are fully mature plants. It's really, really interesting. The juvenile mothers and the runners are from my neighbor next door. And these mature plants are from a neighbor down the road, a friend of mine. She had a 94-year-old, I'm going to get in the frame to tell this story. Okay. She had a 94-year-old neighbor who passed away last year, and the new owners of the home weren't up to taking care and tending to the strawberries. So she rescued as many as she could, put them in a great big pot. And when she found out that I was looking for some strawberries, she said, "I've got a bunch, you can have them." So here I am. His name was Lyle. So this is kind of Lyle's strawberry patch now, continuing the noble tending of this man that I never met. But isn't that kind of cool? You've got this, with plants, you can have this long-term connection. Like I've got some flowers that are from an original plant that's over 6 decades old that was at my grandparents' house when they first bought it. All sorts of interesting stuff. That's what I think of with these strawberries. So it's very, very dear and meaningful to me, and I'm glad to see that they're taking, and I can't wait to see how they overwinter and see how they spread and what they bear next year. So my squashy, gourdy things are doing really nicely. This is a coconut squash coming in over here. Got little watermelons. and ornamental gourds. Everything is setting on nicely, and I think I have a kind of honeybee that's pollinating these. I've got at least 4 different kinds of bees in the garden, from bumblebees and mason bees. I think these are honeybees, little sweat bees. It's interesting, and different kinds of bees definitely gravitate to different kinds of flowers. I just haven't noticed that to this extent in the past, so the pollinators are the real highlight to me, and these are coming along just fine. Unfortunately, they didn't climb as well as they did last year, but we've talked about that ad nauseum at this point, so let's move on. This cluster of greens over here is spaghetti squash. It's spread really nicely, and there are a ton of flowers, but I don't have a single squash that's set on. I don't know why. It's doing a really nice job crawling and covering the ground, but nothing's setting. Something, I don't know. Well, I'm sure you all caught my video last week of harvesting the potatoes over here. I did really well. I got 25 pounds of potatoes, and once I put them in the ground and mulched them, I never did a single thing afterwards. So they taste terrific, really good looking and good tasting red Norlands. They're in a 5-gallon bucket in the basement, and I filled in the cracks with sand. So those will hold very nicely now. And I reseeded this after picking all the rest of the carrots and processing them. How much was it? Well, I forget how much it weighed, but I know after I processed it all, I food processed them, and then I blanched the carrots. I got 30 cups worth that I froze. I forget the weight off the top of my head. Anyways, so I planted some quick growing things here for my fall garden harvest. A row of radishes, a row of lettuce, because I was out of spinach, and a row of carrots. The carrots are kind of pushing it as far as, days to maturity, but the lettuce and the radishes, of course, will be just fine. And then behind me, I planted a hillage of zucchini, really close to the cauliflower, because now I'm harvesting these, so the zucchini will kind of half grow into this space. That's like 65 days till maturity. I won't get a ton of them like I would, had I planted it early in the spring and let it grow throughout the summer, but I should get some. And then I planted a couple rows of yellow, like wax beans, just bush variety. Again, quick to maturity, and it's better than having nothing in the ground. So this is an experiment for me, because I've really never done any sort of fall garden planting. So once those greens come up, I'm going to lay just some mesh on top of it, or I'm going to put some chicken wire on the inside of this, just to make sure the bunnies don't get to those tiny little fresh greens, because that's what they like the most. So fingers crossed, but I've already got radishes germinating on this row, because they're like 25 days to maturity, So that's pretty cool. So short of showing off absolutely everything in the garden, let's see, those are the real big highlights. Well, a couple things that you didn't see. My State Fair pumpkin is doing well. I've got one that's about this big, so I'm ready to snap off all the rest of the flowers to make sure all the energy goes into that one sucker, and I might get a little syringe and inject it with whole milk every now and then. I heard that was a suggestion that some people give for growing great big pumpkins. Tons of beans all the time, but we've already talked about that. And I talked about the tomatoes and peppers already in the tasks that I have ahead this week. So I'm quite pleased, and I'm thinking about all that I want to do for next year. We've kind of talked about it already, but I'm kind of set on 2 raised beds, additional builds, and some more barrels. My blueberries overwinter well and come back in the spring, then for sure I'll plant a couple more blueberries in half barrels. And I've decided to do something interesting with my beans next year. I'll have to find a picture of it and we'll talk about it in the future, but essentially I'm going to do a bean teepee. Something that's maybe 6 to 8 feet tall in one of my raised beds and have them grow up that. It should look super cool. I'm also planning next year, since my single stemming experiment on my tomatoes was successful, I'm going to do stakes, not just wooden stakes like I have in the corner this year, but copper stakes, 6 to 8 feet tall, and have them climb that in a row in one of the beds. My neighbor suggested that, something he had seen in the past. A guy grew them on copper rods. I don't know that it has anything to actually add to the soil, but they should look pretty, and that's That's really all that I care about at this point, because the tomatoes themselves are going to be fine in the healthy soil that I have. What else am I thinking? Oh, lots of sunflowers everywhere next year, that's for sure. I need to write down all these ideas and maybe make out a little bit of a map. It's so much fun. It's crazy to start thinking about next year already, since we're just in the middle of August and I've got 2 months, left here, 2.5 months. But that's what gardeners do. Anyways, hope things are going well with you. Thanks for tuning in. Have a wonderful week. Happy gardening! Bye.